Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Aftershow. I'm Nikki Novak, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the epic Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, an amazing film, answering some of the questions that the film left behind and talking about the future of Black Panther and a bit about Marvel. And for this episode, we needed somebody who is the authority, the expert, who's written a book about all of this. Kara Mahorn, how are you? First of all, let me just introduce you. You are a podcaster, you are a writer, you are a host. Like I said, you wrote a book called Black Panther, Protectors of Wakanda. You also are the host of Pop Paranormal, the horror podcast on Travel Channel. You are very busy, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I don't know about an authority, but I'm going to do my best. Yeah, there's so many lovely things about this movie, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Okay, so before we move forward, and I am excited to talk to you because I know we just chatted a little bit before we started. You said you've seen this film 3 times. Yeah. And I'm so interested in your perspective. But for people who have not seen Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, this is a spoiler-filled discussion. So if you like that kind of thing before you go see the movie, then, stay with us. Otherwise, leave, come back once you've seen the film. Let's dive into it. The Tomato Meter score on this film, it's certified fresh at 84% on the Tomato Meter. The audience score, 95%. And the critics' consensus is a poignant tribute that satisfyingly moves the franchise forward. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever marks an ambitious and emotionally rewarding triumph for the MCU. Talk about a triumph. $180 million at the box office this week, and the highest ever for November. Over 300 million worldwide. So my overall question before we dive into the details, Karama, how did you feel watching this film for the first time? Is this, the filmmakers had their work cut out for them, obviously, with the passing of Chadwick Boseman. Ryan Coogler saying he almost quit Hollywood. Didn't know if he could move forward. He had already written the story for Black Panther 2 and then had to rewrite the script. And how do you feel overall? Do you feel he succeeded in his mission?
I do. I mean, here's the thing. He had such an incredible task in front of him. And I mean, principal photography had started before Chadwick passed. Like, it's just to have to do a course correct that big and then do a course correct in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of, like, I know it's 2022, but folks, remember 2020? Like, there was a lot going on. And what he was able to achieve, I think he did an incredible job. I've told people I've looked at this movie 3 ways: as a critic, as a Marvel fan, and as well, like, culturally as a Black woman. And all 3 of us love this film. But there is, when you think about it, even the critiques that I have, it's like, what could he have done? What do you do? And also, it's the last movie of Phase 5. So there are certain notes he had to hit because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I think he did a phenomenal job.
I agree 100%. I agree with the audience score. I think, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, I would have been happy with. I thought that this was incredible. I know I don't like to compare to other Marvel films or even Black Panther, but I think the beauty of what they did is they didn't give a lot away in the trailer. Like, I really had no idea where they were going with the story, where they were going with the film, how they would pay tribute to Chadwick and weave it into the story, and how much we would pay tribute versus moving the story forward while being respectful. And it was just, I love going into a movie not knowing a lot. And I love that they did that and they allowed us to be surprised. And then the new worlds that they created, the underwater sequences, the Talocan, and that whole world. I mean, it was just spectacular. And, that first scene on the ship when, they ambushed, that reminded me, and I said this in my tweet, that it made me feel like when I watched Avatar for the first time and you were seeing things on screen that seemed ahead of their time in terms of technology. Like, I don't know how Ryan Coogler pulled this off in terms of something so stunning, paying tribute, moving the story forward, creating something entertaining, creating something respectful, but also enlightening and lifting, and made everybody feel like one and that we were all coming together. It was such a celebration in a sense. I thought it was wonderful. So we both absolutely loved it. We'll try to find things that we didn't love about it as we're talking, as we put our critics' hats on. If you can choose favorite moments in the film and highlights for you.
Oh gosh, that's so difficult. Of course, the Chadwick opening, and I'm saying Chadwick and I'm using Chadwick and T'Challa interchangeably when I say that, because if you weren't crying at the funeral, I was bawling at the silent opening, like the first time we've ever seen the Marvel opening that is just completely silent with just images of Chadwick. I was done. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to make it to the rest of this movie. But it let you know we've gotten the elephant out of the room, but this is what we're going to be dealing with. And then when you see 1 year later and you're looking at Shuri, and then I realized, I'm like, this movie is about grief. Shuri's 5 stages of grief that we watch her go through. That was a huge highlight for me, just watching her arc. I thought Letitia Wright did an incredible job. Tenoch Huerta, Namor, my God. Like, I think some of the highlights for me, besides seeing Talocan like represented, which was gorgeous in and of itself, was just how they subtly also explained who he was without using that many words or that many words in English. For instance, he said when you see him being born and he talks about his mother and he realized that he would age very slowly. It's very clear all of a sudden that, when you see her as an old woman and she's telling him, I would like to be buried on land, and he goes to land and it looks like he's a child. I'm like, oh my God, him and Yoda are the same age. He's 50, but he's like, he looks like he's 10. Oh my God. It's like, so I just thought it was like absolutely incredible the way they showed that. A lot of the moments of how he saw the surface world were painted on the wall. Like, there was a lot of symbolism there. I love that. Of course, Talocan, and then, Angela Bassett, like, who should win all the things. I take issue with the fact that, she was taken out, her character was taken out in the film, but we'll get there.
Ooh,
but
yeah.
She embodied this woman who had to bury her husband, bury her son, is now running a country and is not here for your excuses. Like, she was incredible. And I thought that scene between, obviously her and Okoye, where Okoye has lost Letitia and she doesn't know if her child is alive or not. That was one of the most profound moments in the film. And then the last highlight I would say is the fight between Shuri and Namor. That was hardcore. And there were moments that had very little music. Sound effects, yes, but very little music. And I found that really, really powerful, even though the music and the score was absolutely, incredible. But there were so many moments, there's just too many to really count, but those are the big ones that come to mind for me.
I want to add, you touched on it, but Okoye, I loved Angela Bassett, that powerhouse speech she gave, Have I Not Suffered Enough? But when she fired her, the humiliation on her face, and how much that position meant to her and how much she was losing, hats off to Denai as well, right? I mean, talk about a great, tennis match between two great actors, and
absolutely,
and that power between the two of them. But I won't waste too much time because I concur with all of your, all of it. But I also liked Shuri, and And Namor sort of having those quieter moments where he explained, and you touched on that too, where he explained to her his point of view, because we've always heard in the past, oh, I like a villain that's misunderstood, or that, you understand his motivations. He's not evil necessarily. He has real reasons for doing what he does, and those make the best villains. Never has that been more apparent than in this film, where he brought me, such a great actor. He's so much charisma. He brought me to so many different places during the film, to where I understood him. I wanted everybody to just get along, to where I hated him when he then, did what he did. And what an introduction to his character.
Oh, absolutely.
And cannot wait to see more of him, and how often that doesn't happen with certain villains in any film, not Marvel exclusively, but so many forgettable villains that I don't really care. And I've seen enough after one film. I'm like, give me more of that, because that was incredible, but also the world building. Okay. So let's talk about, so you mentioned that you loved Letitia's performance. What did you think about how they incorporated her, wearing the suit and sort of taking on the Black Panther mantle, so to speak, in this film?
Well, now this is the comic book part of me.
Okay.
There were, in the comics a few years ago, a writer named Jonathan Hickman created something. It was for T'Challa, but I think they applied it to her in this case. He gave him sort of Avatar: The Last Airbender powers, where he could talk to all of his past, the Black Panthers, and we saw that in the first movie when T'Challa was speaking to T'Chaka.
Yeah,
but the energy they also created in the comics was that whoever needed to be there when you needed them stepped up. And so I liked the fact that they kind of brought that through. She was going through her stages of grief. Denial was one of them. Her going from grieving to anger to acceptance when she's having that conversation with Namor, to then, absolute rage. What that did to Shuri was fascinating. And I also loved how Winston Duke's M'Baku embraced his role as leader and counselor to the now Queen Regent. And I just thought that whole arc was fascinating. There's only one part that did not work for me.
Okay.
And it was not in Letitia's performance. It was in the editing. And that was when she had him dead to rights and you thought she was going to kill him, and she makes the decision not to. I don't think there was a strong enough impetus there to not kill him. And I do think that if her mother was still alive, if she was like in a injured or in a coma, or she could hear her mother, she did see her mother in her mind, but she just sort of popped up and she's like, oh, okay, I won't kill him. I just felt like that could have had a few more beats. And so that to me was the only thing that was a little bit off. I'm glad that he didn't die, because I want to see Tenoch Huerta again. But I do think that Letitia's character as Shuri really took a very, very interesting arc. But I think at the same time, you could see her grieving through Chadwick just under that layer. There were some moments he just wasn't acting.
Yeah. I think what's interesting too is in Black Panther, she represented technology. And in this film, she's the heart of the film. That's a tall order for an actress to pull off. She was also, in the first one when we were introduced to her, everybody fell in love with her character, right? Just because she did bring the technological side to things. She had that great banter with Chadwick, and their relationship was so integral to why that film worked. It was such a cute back and forth between the two of them. So to have her have to move forward without him and create a new arc for her character and a new, like you said, the 5 stages of grief, she did a wonderful job. And I hadn't really thought about that moment. You're right about what's her motivation for letting him live. It did remind me a little bit of Eternals. Remember in Eternals?
Yes.
I remember watching it and going, oh, this reminds me of that moment that didn't quite work, but I didn't really think it did. I mean, I had a few other issues. Little small issues with this film. That wasn't one of them. But now when you point that out, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I mean, same. I'm glad she did. So moving forward, Angela Bassett is getting a little bit of Oscar talk for this performance.
As she should.
It's a tough category this year. This is a really great year for female actresses, both in lead and supporting. But you believe, I mean, it's just obvious that you feel like she should be nominated for this performance.
Well, it's funny, the funny thing about the Oscars is I always feel like the people who win so often Best Actress should have gotten it for like another movie, but they give it to them in the year that they,
1,000%.
Like Angela Bassett has done so many incredible films. Like, what's love got to do with it? Like, come on. So I think that, yes, there is some tough competition, but the amount of screen time that she got and the amount of moments that they let her do her thing. If you notice, when she was at the UN and they were trying to, talk around her and tell her like her, what Wakanda should be doing for the rest of the Western world, as well as when she was in those chambers with Okoye, letting her know that I'm sorry, you are no longer of service. And even when she was on the beach trying to plead with her child to get through her grief, all of those moments, if you notice, they were close-ups and they were medium shots. It was very rare that they went wide because they wanted, the camera just loves this woman and she's so incredible at what she does.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about Chinook, but let's just dive into him a little bit deeper. Thoughts on his character overall and the writing of his story, and where do you want to see him go in the future?
I thought he was written beautifully. I love the fact that he was introduced in silence and in darkness. Like that was whipping that helicopter around by its, and you didn't see him. You didn't see him. And the thing I loved also about the Talokani, that when they started singing that siren song and people started jumping off the boat, I was like, oh my God, they're using lore from the sea and giving it to indigenous people. Like every single thing that you've ever heard now, sirens, mermaids, everything. I'm like, that's out the window. It's all from the Talokan. It's all them. And, but then when that helicopter's in the air, because remember, it takes off and they all just look up. No one is pressed. They just kind of looking up. And then it starts whipping around and you don't see why it was thrown into the sea. That was his introduction. And then you see him speak when he comes on land to meet Queen Rwanda. And it was really funny. He's like, oh, wow, it's beautiful here. The air is so lovely. Like, I just love not just the lines, but the way Tenoch Huerta really embodied the role, because when Shuri says to him, these are Mesoamerican artifacts, but these are your things. Like, how old are you? And it really came to you to see like this man, they look at him like he's a god because he ages as slowly as Wolverine. Like he could be like hundreds of years old. And it's just fascinating how he embodied that in just a few scenes. And I also loved his snark, his conversation that would be amusing sometimes. Like when Shuri's like, I'd love to see, the rest of your kingdom. And he's like, okay, you could go down there in that, but you'll be crushed. Or you can wear this suit. Like he had these moments of comedy that I thought were absolutely fantastic. His concept of timing, his moments, and there are things that he did he is such an incredible actor, even with his facial expressions. And that is an example of a really not just well-trained, but well-versed actor. And I loved all of that with him. And everything he said, listen, this is what I'm here to do. This is why we're doing it. If you do not obey me, this is what's going to happen. And he stayed true to his word.
How did you feel about the underwater sequences, the world that it built? I've heard people criticize a little bit the VFX, that they thought they were a little bit murky. It wasn't as bright as Black Panther. How did you feel about that?
I do think that the choice to use a different, and I do not have the name of the DP in front of me, but the choice to have a different DP this time did make a difference. I did not want this to be bright and pink and purple like Aquaman. I didn't want to see that.
Oh,
but I didn't.
No, that's not to criticize Aquaman. No, but Aquaman is brilliant, and it's
just a different movie. Yeah,
it's a different movie.
It's just a different movie. But I definitely, and here's the thing: the first time I saw it, it was like a screener theater, and sometimes the screener theaters, the sound is better than the screen itself. Yeah. So I was like, all right, let me see it again. But I've seen it 3 times, and I'm still getting Game of Thrones, like, why is it so dark in certain areas? And so I really wish that some parts of that were brighter. I don't know if that's a VFX choice. I feel like that's a color correction choice. And that's a decision that was made by Coogler and his team. And I think, I have an editing background, and I definitely can tell you that sometimes the screens that are being edited on and that people are seeing things on are the best quality in the world. But the scenes that are delivered, when you see a movie, it's never going to look as good as it did on that screen that the director was looking at. So I definitely agree. I loved the concept of Talokan. I loved how beautiful it was. And I love the fact that he had vibranium to bring his people a sun, that he had charged vibranium in the ocean. I love that. But I really do wish we were able to see more of the people and that it wasn't so dark. I do know that they're represented in that big throne scene. There's supposed to be thousands of people, but I didn't really get that until they were at war with Wakanda. And then I'm like, oh, there are a lot of Talokan. Okay.
Yes. When we first dove into I felt like it was as expansive as it was. I was expecting it to be a little bit more. And then my brain, of course, goes to Avatar. And what are we going to see? How is it going to be different? And I couldn't help but sort of compare. And I think maybe that's why a little bit it made me aware of the VFX only in the underwater sequences, because I've seen a preview of Avatar in 3D, and I know the timing of them coming out around the same time kind of made me think of it. But the Talokan people in general, such a beautiful culture. And this is, again, you think about how Ryan started this film and having to deal with the grief, and then to create these new fighting styles, new worlds, new cultures, the way he introduced them. That's why this film is so brilliant. And let's get a little bit into award season talk, because of all of the potential nominations, in my opinion, the one that should be nominated is Ryan Coogler for director.
Oh, absolutely.
That is the one above everything else that I would hope for.
Absolutely. I think that Ryan Coogler as a director, co-writer, all of that, I absolutely think he should win. I also think that Hannah Beechler, who won last time for production design, she should win. Definitely costume design. Yeah, Ruth E. Carter again. Please give her flowers again, because those plumes, those feathers, oh my God. Even the new suits, even those tiny, tiny details, like Okoye, who is general of the Dora Milaje, she has a gold band around her neck, and her bracers are gold. When she's stripped of that, those gold bands go to Io. So she is now, and it's a visual thing, they never say it, she is now the head of the Dora. And then, of course, I'm because I wrote a book about them, full disclosure, I'm a little partial to the Dora Milaje, but I definitely think that that's where a lot of the costume design stuff, when the Midnight Angels came in, that stuff was absolutely stunning. So I really, really think that costume design should win, production design should win, but I'm in complete agreement with you. At minimum, Ryan Coogler should win for best direction and possibly best co-writing.
What about best picture? Should it be nominated?
I do think it should be. I do think it will be. I don't know if it'll win, because personally, I think the first movie should have won, but superhero movies, it's so hard for them at the Oscars. It really is. I do think that there is still a bias against fantasy and comic book films, that they are not high art. They are just, part of a big advertising machine. And I'm not saying that latter part isn't correct, but it doesn't mean that they can't be executed beautifully. I would love for it to win Best Picture. I hope it gets nominated. not sure if it'll happen just because I'm jaded. I'm jaded by the Academy.
It's interesting because this is the first year. There's been a couple, obviously Black Panther was nominated and a couple superhero films have been nominated in the past couple of years. But I feel like because of Top Gun Maverick, because of the Batman, because of this film, you also have Elvis that some people are saying, and that's a blockbuster film as well, that you're going to have for the first time a lot of what people consider not high art films being nominated this year. And this could potentially be the year that one of these films does break through and win. And I think in terms of popularity, people tuning in, I think there's a wave. I think the last few years, it was a lot of independent films, smaller films, more high art films. And now people, it's like the pendulum always swings. Now I feel like it's going to swing back to, I would love to have that Titanic moment from 1999, I think it was, where you had the highest ratings of all time, because you had audiences that cared about the result and cared about the films that were nominated. And that's not a reason to be nominated. These films should be nominated I think they were the best films of the year, quite frankly. And from what I've seen almost every award season film now so far. So, okay. And so just to wrap up the award season talk, cinematography and VFX, do you think they deserve nominations, and hair and makeup?
Hair and makeup, definitely.
Yeah.
Cinematography, it was good, but I still feel, and I understand why this movie was very cool and much physically darker in color than the first movie. The first movie was very warm. Remember the fight scenes with with Killmonger and T'Challa,
right.
That water that was very warm, very orange. This was very cool, very blue and very dark. It's a matter of preference. I'm not sure if I would give it best cinematography. Hair and makeup, absolutely. Costume design, absolutely. Ludwig Göransson's score, again.
Oh, yes.
When all of the music, when the Talokan come up out of the water, that siren song, that was chilling. Even the music that we hear within Talokan and the chants and language that they're using there, like all that research, again. And then, of course, he brought back Baba Mal for the funeral march and a lot of the music that we heard within Wakanda. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Even when they went to Haiti and Cape Verde, he found pieces of not just indigenous, but local music and instruments to use. So I just think Ludwig Göransson's score should absolutely win.
So this is the time that I'm going to ask you to put, of the three of you that watch this film, the critic hat on, and to talk about any negatives that you found in the film or anything that you thought maybe wasn't in line with what you were hoping for.
So yes, my critic hat, it's so funny because I've had this conversation with so many people. I think my critic hat would first say it did not probably need to be 2 hours and 40 minutes, which was 30 minutes longer than the first film. The first film was 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think there were moments that could have been shorter, that could have been given to other things, or just shorter as a whole. As a fan, I loved the length, and I loved that it was, as long as it was, and I got to sit with some things before we ran off and looked at something else. But the critic in me was like, this, I could have shaved about 20 minutes off of this film. I think I mentioned earlier my little issue with Shuri's resolution towards the end. That is also tied to another problem I had with the film, and that was the death of Ramonda. I understood the gravitas that they were going for, but unfortunately it's sort of a comic book trope to kill a woman to get everybody to do all the things. And I was kind of annoyed by that. At the same time, I was really devastated that it was, Ramonda's character, but also in terms of the film as a whole. And there's precedence for this in the comics. Ramonda could have been in a coma. Like she should have obviously had same scene, same, saving of Riri, but put her in a coma, let her spend the rest of the, movie trying to recover, trying to regain consciousness. And then you have a reason for Shuri to change her mind, because all of a sudden she hears her mother's voice, now awake, through her Komoyo beads, telling her, Shuri, this is not, We don't want to do this. You do not want to kill someone. This is not what you want to do. And at the same time, somebody has mentioned to me, but she probably would have wanted to take out, no more for, taking her child. But I felt like that would have been a really great moment. It would have been a fabulous moment to see her in Haiti with her grandson later. I mean, they are in scenes together earlier, but we don't know it's, her grandson at the time.
Yeah.
But I just felt that there were so many missed opportunities for the third and fourth acts of this film because she was not there. So that, to me, that bothered me. And I also think that, as a whole, also, we spent so much time mourning T'Challa that when she did die, it was sort of like, she's dead. I just processed that she's gone. And now we're looking at her cast date. And now, okay, we're all moving to the Jabari lands. And I was like, she deserved a little bit more time than that, and so that also kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. So I wish there was a little more time spent, wish Ramona lived, wish there was more time spent on her, like a little bit more of her recovery. And then also, yes, a little bit more time spent in Talokan with the people. But I know that's really hard to coordinate, 300 people underwater holding their breath. So, hats off to the people who were able to pull it off and give us what we got. But I think those are my biggest criticisms of the film. Everything else, and again, I've seen it 3 times. Everything else, I'm okay with. I really am.
Yeah, I keep agreeing with you, but I thought it was a touch too long as well. I did sort of think afterwards there was a few places I saw that they could have shaved a little bit. Maybe, like you said, 2 hours, 15 minutes. But Ramonda, I agree. And the reason why it bothered me is because we are mourning T'Challa, but we are also mourning Chadwick. And there was a reason why that had to be in the story. Obviously, the actor passed away. So then to choose to kill another character, in my opinion, took away a little bit from paying homage to Chadwick, because that's a story point that you chose to kill her. You didn't have to. You had to with T'Challa.
Exactly.
And so I felt like it took like the film should be a tribute to his death within the character and the actor. And I feel like that took away a little bit from it. And I want to see more of her. I mean, you don't let her, she has these great scenes, and then I want to see where her character would have gone moving forward.
Yeah, that was a choice that I just really didn't agree with, and still doesn't quite sit right with me. If we're not going to get another Black Panther until, 2028 or something, it's possible that she just said, you know what, I do not want to be, beholden to that. At the same time, we find out at the end of the movie that she did know her grandchild. So there's room to have a story. I mean, look what they did with Black Widow. There's room for a story in between of, grandmother, spending time with her grandchild, T'Challa. And there's room for flashbacks, and there's room for conversations and other scenes. So it might not be the last that we see of her, but I was kind of sad about that.
I want to go into talking about some of the surprises of the film, and it kind of, I'm tying it into my biggest issue with the film, and that was the Killmonger scene. I did not think, I was so excited because you first see him from the back and the camera pans around, and for a second I was like, who is this going to be? I didn't realize it was going to be him. It was a great reveal, but then the air was let out of the tires. He is such a dynamic actor, and it was such a wishy-washy scene, in my opinion. They didn't give him a chance to shine. And you go from going, oh, it's Killmonger, to going, oh, that was it? That was his cameo? I feel like he had to be disappointed with it. How did you have an issue with it? Tell me I'm wrong, but
No. Yeah. I don't think, well, here's the thing. Was it too short? Yes. But I do think when we see the uncut scenes or the scenes that were left on the cutting room floor, we're going to see a longer monologue out of him. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, first of all, I did like the way they brought him back. I just wish we saw more of him. I did like the way that his energy had to be what she needed to come back and cross that threshold of, I need to take charge. I need to do what I need to do, because that was not an energy that she was used to, exercising. She was always, kid sister in the lab. And Shuri had to do a lot of growing. I liked the fact that when she came back, she brought part of him with her.
Yes, that part was cool. Yes, that part was cool.
I just wish the scene or their back and forth was longer. I wish she came back and didn't get in the mantle right away. This is what I mean by like some of the lengths. Like I would have taken some of the time from some other scenes that I felt were not necessary and put them back into a conversation with her, or her having dreams and having to see him again and him going like, you still doubting me? And like a battle within her mind with him. So I do agree that I wish there was more Killmonger, more Michael B. Jordan. You're never going to see me ask for less Michael B. Jordan.
Same.
Ever.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like when you hear people talking about the film, you would have expected it would have been like a big Twitter thing, like, oh, Killmonger was back, Michael B. Jordan, the big reveal, and no one's talking about it because I think it was a little bit anticlimactic, unfortunately. And I think maybe part of it was the way it was also shot. Just
I definitely felt like that entire scene was done post. Like we've all heard about, Letitia Wright being injured on set and like having the shooting stopping for a while and then having to start again. I definitely felt like this is one of the scenes that were shot very late in the schedule because it did look and feel so different than the rest of the film.
Yeah, like he was working on 20 other projects and said, I'll give you a day.
Exactly. Like he was on Creed. Exactly. Like before I cut my hair for Creed, let's shoot this.
Yeah, he was actually at home when he shot it.
Exactly. Walking around his living room. Yes, yes.
He completely was. Oh, okay, let's talk about the big reveal, Prince T'Challa. I mean, what a moment.
That, when I tell you I bawled. Well, one of the reasons why I also bawled was that my boyfriend's Haitian. I've got friends and family who are Haitian. So I was like, the king is Haitian. Like, that's the first thing that went through my head. And if anybody's looking at what Haiti's been going through, like if you pay attention to the news, this is so beautiful for children and for, and so, but I also love the fact that with all of the rancor surrounding, hashtag recast T'Challa, and a lot of people being very angry about T'Challa not being in this film and not recasting an adult character. And we want T'Challa. We should not have a movie without T'Challa. It's like they heard us, but they weren't going to say anything, because there have been rumors about a child being in this film for like 2 years. So I don't think he's a recent addition. I think he was scripted in from jump. I also, like I mentioned earlier, it was so lovely seeing the movie again and noticing that he is who's in the school that welcomes his grandmother when she comes to visit. And he's the one that speaks to her. And he's like, oh, you want to see the teacher, right? And so like he knows there's like their little secret. And I just thought that was so beautiful. I also thought they cast the actor beautifully because if Chadwick had a child, he would look like this actor.
Yeah.
It also leads into what I was saying earlier about the next phase of the MCU. We're going into the young Avengers. We're going into the young version. And if anybody's curious, there were alternate universes where in the comics where T'Challa had a child. And there was a child named Missouri that was an Avenger. So it would make perfect sense to me if in 2 or 3 years, this 7-year-old, they age him up. We jump forward in time and we now have a teenage T'Challa that is coming to the States and avenging with Ms. Marvel and everybody else. I would find that fascinating. But at the same time, it also sets up multiple things, which have also happened in the comics. There have been a time that there has been someone on the throne as king or queen, and that the person within the Black Panther suit was not king or queen. They were simply the protector of Wakanda as Black Panther. And even in the comics, T'Challa's father dies when he's very young, and he does not take the mantle right away. There is a regent in his stead. His uncle is in power. So they're setting up a lot of things that I think are fascinating, because now we do have a world of Wakanda. We have someone who is the protector as Black Panther. We have someone that's going to be sitting on the throne. It looks like that's M'Baku. And now we have this future king. And the choice that he's not going to live in Wakanda, he's going to live in Haiti. He's going to live outside the country until it is time for him to take the throne. I find fascinating.
Let's dive into, the direction and the focus of this movie. I think the MCU Phase 4 has been criticized. This is a more mature film in a sense than maybe some of the series and movies that we've seen in Phase 4. And then, of course, whenever you have that, you're going to have people that are going to criticize, right? So how do you respond to that?
Phase 4, to me, and also I feel like somebody from Disney might have said this, but don't quote me on that. But I do feel that Phase 4 is all about reflection. So it started with Black Widow and it ended with Wakanda Forever. 2 characters that died. Yes, the actor that played T'Challa passed away, but it just in terms of what we're looking at, where everything in Phase 4 has been a reflection of Endgame, of things that happened in the previous phase. And it's sort of lining us up for a new generation. Every single movie and story, I get the concept of people thinking that Phase 4 felt disjointed. A pandemic will do that. Civic unrest will do that. So I don't think that that's, yes, it is a criticism. Yes, you can agree with it. But I also, again, look at what we were in and look at how we weren't going to be able to see movies in theaters and how a lot of stuff shifted to streaming. And so they also had their work cut out for them because the majority of what they were trying to create was supposed to all have hit the screens by now. And we should have already been tumbling into the next phase. And here we are in November of 2022, just hitting, Black Panther, which is now the end of the phase.
That's a really good point. That now we're just, we would have moved forward already had it not been for the pandemic. And so I think sometimes people's lack of patience has to do with that. I mean, look, Phase 4, you didn't have any of the Avengers movies that kind of were the thread. Because you are setting up this new world. A lot of the characters that we came to know and love from the Avengers films and, past phases have moved on, have, retired. So you need that reset. You need to hit the reset button and you need to build that world. And in Feige, I always trust, I believe. And, we're not going to get Avengers until Phase 6. Like you said, this would have come sooner in the timeline had it not been for the pandemic. And people forget that, right? We always kind of want to call that a blip in a sense in terms of, but it does factor into what happens in film.
It does. And also, I feel like we have seen the Avengers, but people don't realize who they're looking at, meaning they're setting up another generation. So I feel like the previous phases have been the older millennial Gen X reliving their childhood, seeing all of these comic book characters come to life. And that's how fandom drives, a lot of the marketing. It's like, oh, this is the comic or a character that I grew up with. But now what we're being introduced to is all of these new Avengers. Like even in the comics, there was a Young Avengers. And Kate Bishop, Hawkeye was in there. Miss Marvel wasn't, but there's no reason why she couldn't be. But everybody's kid was introduced, like even Captain America Winter Soldier, Elijah Bradley, he becomes Patriot in the comics. We also have a new Captain America. Like, even though people I don't understand what we were doing here, you are being introduced to all of the new characters that I think are going to be making up the next phase. I mean, look at Heimdall has a kid, Axel, Thor Love and Thunder, or the God Butcher's daughter is the goddess of love. I think people are so used to looking for where is the Steve Rogers, where is the Tony Stark, not realizing that, okay, but now we have Ironheart. Now we might have a kid Loki, and I think, on top of everything else, we're going to get X-Men because not only was Miss Marvel introduced as a mutant, but Tenoch Huerta's character, Namor, said very plainly, I am a mutant. So we're about to get X-Men in the next phase. So I think what it is that I think a lot of people are waiting for the main course, not realizing they just got the appetizer.
No, you're 100% right. And they want that familiarity, right? They want to see the stuff that's been familiar to them, the characters that have been familiar to them. But if you're going to move forward into a new phase, you need that moment where you get to know these new characters. So I'm curious now, as you were talking, how you felt about phase 4 films overall, like which ones you loved and did you appreciate, which ones you appreciated the most and which ones did you take issue with, if any?
It's funny. We were just talking about the seriousness of films, and I felt The Eternals was very serious. And it did not feel in line. That was the first movie to me that actually felt not quote unquote in line with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then I realized, okay, we're hitting notes here. We're hitting a type of a tone here. And then I include the Disney Plus shows in the MCU, you know, in my sort of purview, because they hopped in and out of it. Another very, you know, serious look at even Captain America, Winter Soldier. There were some heavy themes in there. You know, Moon Knight, his mother's abuse. Like, I was like, oh, we're going in. Yeah. You know, so I actually think that seriousness is one of the things that I liked, that thread that was throughout. I think my favorite show probably is still WandaVision, just because of the execution with all the different TV shows and not knowing that it was her mind and things like that. I think that and most of Captain America Winter Soldier were fun to me. Loki is also my favorite, but I'm a Doctor Who fan and it felt very Whovian. So that's the other reason why so the geek in me really enjoyed it. But of all the movies of Phase 4, I'm probably going to say that Shang-Chi and Wakanda Forever are probably my favorites. And just because of how big they were and how world encompassing and also the graphics and the effects and everything. And I'm a big fan of people who aren't born with superpowers, but get access to either something magical or tech or something that gives them access. And so they have to reconcile their real world issues and problems with their newfound powers. So I think both of those movies represent that. And I think those are my favorites.
We're in line with it, completely in line with the TV shows, Phase 4, completely in line. But, you know, it's funny, as I reflect on Phase 4, I think initially, like when I saw Eternals, I remember going to the premiere and being like, when I look back, I want to watch it again now. I'm curious because I think it's that initial shock, again, of not having the familiar or know where it's going or seeing the thread. I think we'll see the thread as we move forward. They're laying the groundwork, like you said. But I appreciate that, even a Multiverse of Madness. I appreciate the different tone that it. I think when people reflect on it, you know, a few years from now, they'll look back with a different appreciation, where they'll see how it sort of had that standalone feeling. And then one last question before we wrap up: should Coogler direct Secret Wars? What are your thoughts on that?
I think he absolutely could. But what he went through, because I've seen some of those interviews where he talked about like almost quitting Hollywood. I don't know if he's got it in him. I think he's going to sit down for a minute. Like, they're going to have to give him a whole lot of money. But I think
they're already.
I think he's going to take a break. I would love it if he did it. I think it would be fantastic if he did it. But if he took a break and then came back and did a Young Avengers, I'd be here for that too.
Yeah. And he has said, you know, in terms of Black Panther 3 and that, he is going to take a beat and he's going to sort of see how people respond. He's going to let it digest and he's going to, you know, they obviously have ideas. But in terms of being the most, you know, the Russos have said they're not touching it. In terms of who is the most competent, maybe not willing, but able, it has to be him.
Yeah, I think it should be him. I don't think it should be Taika Waititi. I love him to death, but I don't want comedy on that one. I want and here's the other thing. We're going to get, now again, I would love it if there was a Dora Milaje story coming to Disney Plus. The only thing we can say is that there is a show coming to Disney Plus starring Denai Guerrera as Okoye. Will it be called Okoye? Will it be called World of Wakanda? We don't know. We don't have absolute corroboration on that yet. I want him involved in that. You know what I mean? And then maybe his, love for staying in the Marvel universe will, and if they treat him really well, then he'll give us a Secret Wars. But I would really love it if it's not the Russo brothers, I would love it if it was Ryan. And I just, it can't be Taika. No, I need him to take a seat, like several.
Yeah, I don't think, I don't, but I don't see it. I don't see it. It's a certain style it's going to have a certain, somebody that has that world building and that ability to sort of juggle a lot of balls. And I haven't seen that yet from Taika.
And I don't think, and what Chloe Zhao did with Eternals was lovely and lyrical, but I don't think that's what Secret Wars needs.
This has been such an incredible episode. Your passion
Thank
to
you.
this and your knowledge has just been marvelous.
I see what you did there.
I know so many people have done it, but it just came to my head. So thank you so much for giving us your time and wisdom. And if you can give yourself a plug and remind everybody where they can find you.
Sure. I'm Karama, aka the Blurred Girl, TheBlerdGurl, all over the internet. I'm still on Twitter for the time being until it implodes. And then I'm also on TikTok and Instagram. Please check me out there. And I'm also the co-host of Pop Paranormal, the horror podcast that's all about horror movies. And yeah, if you get a chance and you really liked the movie, please pick up my book, Black Panther, Protectors of Wakanda, A History and Training Manual of the Dora Milaje. It's all about all those beautiful women that you saw in the movie and their weapons and their skills. And I was lucky enough, Marvel let me write their origin story. So I'm just so excited to be able to contribute to like canon in like a teeny tiny way. But yeah, if you can pick it up, I'd appreciate it.
Well, congratulations on your book. Thank you again. It's been such a joy talking to you. And thank you all for joining us. And we will see you on the next episode of The Aftershow.